All right, hello everyone. Here to continue with our nematode discussion. So up to this point, you should be familiar with some of the nematode characteristics, their life cycles, a little bit of their anatomy, the cuticle, a little bit of their ecology and biology, but I just want to kind of get into a few more specific species. We talk about Ascaris. We talk about some of the other hookworms, things like that. Now we're going to get into, again, some more parasitic types of worms that can have some harmful effects on humans. So we start with the trichina worm, known as Trichonellasporalis. This is one of the worms that is associated with undercooked pork. So we've talked about this before. You got to cook the pork well. You got to heat it long enough, hot enough to get rid of all of these nematode parasites that may occur in these animals. So it is an internal parasite commonly acquired through the ingestion of undercooked pork. So again, cook the pork chops, cook the carnitas, cook all that stuff very well, very thoroughly. This is a little bit of a different ecology than some of the other species, but Trichinella is the causative agent for trichinosis. So trichinosis is the medical condition that is that derives from the encystment. So when these little worms get into the muscle tissue of humans, they generate these little protective cysts. They kind of sense that they're not in the right location. So they know that they need to get in the digestive system of another host. So they just kind of burrow their way into the muscle tissue and wait for another predator to consume that host. These cysts in the muscles can be very painful. They can basically cause you to lose the function. If it's in the arm muscle, you don't really use that arm very well. If it's in the leg, you don't really use that leg muscle very well. So loss of function, decreased strength, mobility, and I've never actually heard of it being fatal, but I guess theoretically it could be fatal if it affects so many muscle fibers in the body. So trichinella, again, this is how you would see it, and this is a microscopic view. So you're not going to see these cysts necessarily with the naked eye in the pork meat, or if they're in the human hosts. But again, you can see the little worms just kind of embedded in that muscle tissue, and this idea of trichinella. So again, one of these parasitic nematode species. Another is a group that we call filarial worms. So filarial worms are thread-like worms. They're a small worm that basically gets moved around by arthropod vectors. So we haven't covered arthropods yet. We are going to get into those a little bit later. But the arthropod vector that is associated with most filarial worms are the mosquitoes. So mosquitoes, I'm sure you've been parasitized by a mosquito. So it lands on the host, sucks up blood, but in the same time that it's drawing blood, it can also contaminate when it punctures. It can add these little larvae of the filarial worms. So these parasites are transmitted by biting mosquitoes. The adults feed in the host tissue, they mate, and they produce these microfilariae. The microfilariae are the ones that basically go up back into the salivary glands of the mosquitoes, and they get transferred to the next host. So there's a neat ecology. It's not good for humans, but it's a really neat ecology on how they know the timing of when to kind of affect the capillaries of the blood. They get linked on certain circadian rhythms, so they become more active when the mosquitoes are more actively biting. It's an interesting cellular signaling process that happens there, communication signals. So if you are unfortunate enough to be sort of bit by a mosquito and contaminated by that mosquito, one of the worms that is potentially harmful is this Wuchereria bancrofti, right? So that is the filarial worm that we associate with lymphatic blockage. So it blocks the lymphatic sort of drainage of the body. And once that happens, now fluid can't return back to the heart. So you start to get this fluid accumulation in the legs and the extremities that produces a lot of pressure on the nerves, causes pain, discomfort, and continual swelling as that fluid can't drain back. So we call this lymphatic inflammation, lymphedema, and there's the condition elephantiasis that is associated with these parasitic filarial worms. So again, it can be treated, but it would have to kind of go in there and basically open up these very small capillaries and allow drainage to happen. So it's something that is much easier to prevent than to fix, right? So you want to always be careful when you're in this type of habitat. Basically, be careful, use bug spray, that kind of stuff. And this does not happen in the United States. This is a more of a tropical type of situation. But filarial worms. Another species, another type of filarial worm, we call Dirofilaria immitis. This is known as heartworm. And I don't know if you are a pet owner, maybe you're a dog owner. When you go to the vet, they're always pushing you to put your pets on heartworm medication. Well, what heartworms are, they're these little, basically filarial worms that clog up in the heart. So this is a dissected heart. It's been removed out of the body of the host. And you can see that this heart cannot be functional, right? That heart can't be drawing blood in and pumping blood out when it's so occluded with all of these worms. So it becomes a very ineffective pump. You're not being able to pump blood through the body. That host is going to suffer, right? So again, you want to prevent this. If you live in an area where there's a lot of mosquitoes, where that risk of mosquito contamination biting the pets very often, you want to put them on this medicative treatment, this heartworm medication. You can't necessarily just start them without testing it first. If they already have some worms in the heart, those worms have to be removed out before you can start them on this medication. So talk to your vets if you're an owner that's concerned with this type of parasitism on your animal. So again, if you're a good pet owner, very, very important thing to consider here, this heartworm medication. Another one, kind of an oddball one, doesn't really affect us here in the United States, but if we were to go to Africa, the Middle East, India, there's a species called dracunculus, right? Dracunculus medinensis, right? This is the Guinea worm, also known as the fiery serpent. So this is a subcutaneous parasite. So it lives underneath the skin, right? Kind of drills its way underneath the skin, causes these skin ulcers to develop, and also can affect lymphatic sort of drainage. So it can cause also swelling, localized swelling in some areas. So here is shown going into an animal, pig probably. There's the little worms, the nematodes. And here we see that ulcer that's sort of ruptured, and we have a little twig trying to pull the worm out. So you can see that these are associated with areas with a lot of poverty, a lot of contamination to the water supply. And again, there's the ulcer, the ruptured ulcer here, the little worm kind of extending out. And you can see the length of these, right? This is basically the tibia, the shin of probably a child. And you can see then the length of the worm. So it's still kind of embedded in the skin. So you're looking at worms maybe, that long or more, right? So we don't worry about these types of worms, dracunculus here in the United States, because we don't have that vector. We don't have that intermediate, I should not say vector, that intermediate host that are these copepod species. So we don't have the ecology, we don't have all the pieces of the puzzle that are required for the completion of the life cycle in this species here. So again, just wanted to give you a few more species to kind of show you some of the diversity, which is just a tiny bit of the diversity that is in the nematodes. So they have a lot of different species, just showing you some of the ones that have direct implication, negative direct implication on the human species. So with that, I'll call that a show, and keep an eye out for the last one, and we'll be done with our nematode discussion soon.